We're here to entertain, razzle dazzle. I've been in video games for 28 years. I've been running Iron Galaxy with my partner in crime, Chelsea Blasco. She is my co-CEO. I'm stepping down, though, at the end of this year to embark on a new journey. So I figured it'd be a perfect time for me to walk through some of the most important lessons that I've learned at Iron Galaxy. Prior to Iron Galaxy, I was at Sony, EA, Midway, Capcom, so I've had sort of a vibrant past in the industry. Some of you may have seen me from a viral video where I shared a game with Shu Yoshida, and we went pretty viral on the internet for that. But I want to take it back to IG and our lessons. Here we go. So the first one, be empathetic and build alignment. You're going to work with a lot of partners through your career. You're going to be working with people not only in your business, but you'll also be working with other people at publishers. And one of the most impressive examples I saw is at Iron Galaxy, we work on many different games with many different partners all around the world. And we got the pleasure of starting to work with Riot Games about 6 years ago. And Riot did one of the coolest things ever. So at Riot Games, when you get hired, they walk you through a denubification process. So for your first couple weeks, they basically give you this hat. Everyone literally has to wear this hat on the campus. And you're walking around the campus as a newbie, and you're getting basically trained on how to be denubified and be a new Rioter. What's really neat about that is they flew the whole team, about 10 of their team members, to Orlando. We have 3 studios in Iron Galaxy Studios. We have Chicago, Nashville, and Orlando. So they flew 10 of them to Orlando, and they basically did a 1-week denubification process just for us. And it was so cool because we were able to understand what makes Riot Games tick. We're the first ever co-dev studio that they had ever worked with, so it was important for us to get really indoctrinated into their culture. And you can only imagine, these are some of the other partners we've worked with through the years. So you can imagine if you have to do a denubification process for every company, it's a lot of different work. You know, at Iron Galaxy, we kind of pride ourselves because we have to be a chameleon with every single company we work with. We have to basically adopt and adapt to their way of thinking and doing, right? Some of them use Slack, some of them use Teams, some of them use Discord. So we have to basically adapt and adopt. And building that empathy and understanding what makes them tick is really, really important. Because if you don't do that well, then they're going to want to punch you in the face if you're a bad partner. And if you do that well, and you use AI to do your art, maybe the glasses won't actually be correct. So you're going to see a lot of good, bad AI art in this presentation. One of my favorite questions that I like to ask when I first meet with a partner is basically getting them to visualize what their future looks like. And so, press the button, point this way, press the button. Maybe I press something wrong, and we advance and press the button. Then my clicker isn't working. There we go. Yeah, what does heaven look like? I think that's such an important question because they can start to visualize of what are their goals, what are their aspirations. To some people, it might be kind of traditional. This next one is my heaven, which is a big, beautiful pooch flying through the sky. And to other people, like the team that pitched Baboosh Cats yesterday, maybe this is their heaven, right? But it's important if you understand what your partners are looking for and what heaven looks like, then you can start to build your planning and build your company towards sort of aligning with theirs. And that's really important, right? Understanding your partners and your team is critically important. If you know what motivates them, if you know what makes them happy, then it's going to make for a better, more cohesive team. And walking a mile in their shoes, I've never worn high heels. I can only imagine it would murder my heel spurs. But, think a lot about walking in other people's shoes. What would that feel like, right? What is their lived experience? How do you connect with them? And a great example of this was about 5 years. I've been married to my wife for 17 years. And early on, I realized that she walks into a room and she sees tasks everywhere. And I walk into a room and I see the fridge, right? I'm very basic. And so when we started to realize that she would want all these tasks done, I finally said, well, make me a list. I love lists. I love knocking stuff out and making progress. So on Saturday mornings, there would be a honey-do list of all the things she'd want me to do. And I'd knock it out by 11 a.m., be like, I'm playing GTA today, and go and have fun. But it was awesome because we were able to understand how each other thinks, right? And being able to understand how your partners think, both in business and personal, I think is super, super important. Now on to lesson number 2, one of my favorite ones, being radically transparent. It's really, really important, I think, when you're running a business and as you're part of a team, to just always be honest and transparent. I always think about secrets like steam exploding and building up inside of a kettle, right? So if it overbuilds and explodes, then that's bad news, right? You don't want this to be the to be the outcome. You want to make sure that you're always releasing that steam and being transparent, being honest with not only your partners, but your colleagues is critically important. Now, sometimes, though, it can be a little bit misconstrued. When I started Iron Galaxy 8 years ago, Chelsea would show up. We would have a company meeting. And our company meeting would basically be showing all the progress on all the projects. And everyone would gather in Chicago. And we had our Orlando studio. We'd be on a Zoom together. And Chelsea would just show up with a big list. Just a checklist of here's project A and here's project B. And sometimes you miss the name of a project and stuff like that. And everyone's like, well, what? I want more details. I want more context. And so we changed it over to having each individual person talk about their project, right? By empowering each of the project team members and the leads, they were able to provide more of that context and have more of that honesty and transparency. And that really sort of shifted. Our company meeting became then almost like an awesome sort of profile of all these awesome producers and designers and artists and engineers that would present the progress for their game. Now, the problem is when you're 85 people, which is about the size we were then, it's reasonable, it's manageable, right? You have a whole entire meeting. And at the end, you'd have open Q&A, and people put up their hands and ask whatever questions they want. However, over the next few years, we doubled in size. So we went to about 160. And then we doubled in size again and got to about 300. So the traditional company meeting didn't work anymore, right? It was really hard to fit all of the things. Basically, company meeting became this monthly, let's throw everything in the kitchen sink in, and people would come there and be overwhelmed. We barely get done in 90 minutes. So we started thinking about what is important about sharing information, about that transparency. And the first part was obviously profiling the content, profiling the work that we're doing and celebrating the work. So this almost company meeting became like a, show off your coolest stuff. If you don't have an update that's interesting, doesn't matter. Just bring something cool that you might want to show off. Some teams are like, I don't have anything to show this week. That's no problem, right? Then what we did is we added a town hall. And we separated these 2 weeks apart. So the company meeting is for celebrating content, and it's also for company announcements. The town hall is where anyone can submit any question. And they don't do it totally anonymously. I kind of feel like anonymous feedback in a company setting an atmosphere is a little bit, it's not my favorite, because you're kind of like skirting the actual issues. We like to have honesty and transparency, and that goes both ways. But it allowed this awesome mechanic because everyone would submit all of their problems. Because what was happening at company meetings is at the end when we got the Q&A, people would ask questions. Some of them would be normal questions. Some would be like daggers, right? Of like, why aren't we getting free ramen in the kitchen? Like, well, there's budget issues. And what we found of the 3 partners in the company, me, Dave, and Chelsea, Dave is the founder. He's very sort of stoic to the point, pretty funny, really affable guy. Chelsea, my co-CEO, she's super direct to the point. And then I'm a bit of the storyteller. So what happened when I would answer questions is they thought I was the bullshit artist, just trying to sell them some shit, right? They thought Chelsea was just too staccato, too direct, and was sometimes, to the point. But Dave was just right. It was like the story of the 3 bears, right? Dave was just right. With the town hall, though, by being able to see all the questions submitted ahead of time and then seeing people vote for them, we could start to understand what's important to everyone on the fly. So that way, during the days up, we had time to prepare the correct feedback and address these issues. So that way, by the time the town hall came, it was like very matter of fact. We were able to go into detail and unpack some of the more challenging issues. The other part about a company meeting where just anyone asks something on the fly is it really just biases people that are outgoing, right? A lot of people can't put their hand up and ask a question in front of a room full of people. So we wanted to take that away, right? We want to really make it a more inclusive process. But we realized with just having a company meeting and just having a town hall, the town halls now are very mechanical because you submit these questions and it's very official. We have a company meeting, which is more like celebratory, but they were missing that heart and soul, that connection with the leadership team at Iron Galaxy. So we added a 3rd meeting, which is the Q&A with our founder, Dave Lang. Dave does not look that old. He's actually only a couple years older than me, but I like to make him look old in these presentations. But it was really neat because we knew that Dave had the right balance of being able to answer questions well on the fly about anything, and because fundamentally it is his company, right? It was really awesome for people to feel connected. And so once a month, Dave gets on the phone, and now it's just Dave Lang story time. People ask some questions about what was the craziest thing that ever happened in the company. And the good news about having all these outlets, right? When you sort of line all 3 of these together, is you have so many avenues for communication and transparency that like when a company's going through hard times or going through challenges, you have a lot of touch points, right? Be able to be transparent, to be honest, to be communicative. And so this is going really well. The only part that we realized is that by doing all these different outlets is a lot of people didn't always get the message, right? If we would say it. So what we started to do is we started basically making tons of PowerPoints. And it sounds really boring. We try to make them really interesting. I have adult onset ADHD, pretty sure. I've never actually asked a doctor. I just figured that I do have it. But I realize that I'm a very visual-driven person. And so when we put slides up about, hey, here's the performance of the company, or here's why we're not self-funding our own games, or here's how publishers work, we would show slides and walk it through. And it was really important because then the retention that everyone had was super, super high, right? They were able to understand and retain things. The other part that we do to try to connect with everyone, even though we are over 300 people, is during your onboarding your first week, you get to meet with all three of our beautiful faces. We all do different presentations to the people, and we usually do it in groups of 1 or 2 or 3, so we keep it very small. But that onboarding, I think, is critically important because we're able to set the tone of what the company is, what we're trying to achieve. And it's funny when I tell a lot of people that, I sit down and Chelsea sits down and Dave sits down with every new employee, they're like, how do you make time? And my answer back to them is, how do you not fucking make time? Like, that's the most important part of running a company is the people you're with. And so building that connection is critically important. There's a famous quote here from the Dalai Lama: a lack of transparency results in distrust and a deep sense of insecurity, right? It goes back to the kettle, right, exploding. If we don't have that transparency, if we don't have the communication within our organizations, right, we're going to lead to a lot more conflict. So how can we let the steam come out? And that transparency is a key part of it. All right, lesson number 3, know when to pivot. A lot of us want to make our dream game. We're here for a vision. The reality is a week from now, everything might change, right? The bottom might fall out, your funding might go away, the IP holder might sue you, who knows, right? So knowing when to pivot, I think, along your journey is critically important too. This is how my journey started. I grew up in a farm town in Canada called Abbotsford, BC. It's about 45 minutes south of Vancouver. And I had dreams of being a hockey player, like every good Canadian kid does. The challenge is, my body's not made for hockey. So I would get on the ice, I'd be able to start skating, but I couldn't stop. So I'd fall a lot, and so my dreams were crushed. But of course, I needed to pick something else. So my sister was a figure skater, my brother was a hockey player, and I played trombone, which apparently Midjourney doesn't know how to render. That's a trumpet, kind of. So that was me in band class. I became a trombone player, and that was my creative outlet, as well as playing games on the side. And then throughout high school, because we were in a small town, there wasn't a lot of career coaching and mentoring. There wasn't a lot of help to tell you what to do in college or where to go. So I was really good in chemistry. So because I didn't have any mentors or coaches, I guess I'm going to be a chemist, right? So when I applied to go into university, I applied in the chemistry department. And I joined, and I was like, I guess I'm doing chemistry. And about one semester, and I'm like, what am I doing? What, I'm going to work in a lab? Like, I don't even like this. I'm just doing it because it was my best grades. So I was like, well, let's pivot, right? I want to pivot to something new. So I was like, I love video games. I love, not good at coding, like Turbo Pascal. I can do a little choose your own adventure, very basic things. I was okay at modeling, right? Could use 3D Studio Max. I was okay at building presentations and layout, but I wasn't really good at any of it. So when I swapped over from chemistry to computer science, I got my absolute ass kicked by math. High-end math is very, very difficult for people like me. I'm sure many of you in this room are engineers, and it was easy and a breeze for you. For me, not so much. I'm a very basic kind of person. I like to know how the process works and why do A to do B to do C. I want to see it all sort of illustrated out in front of me, because once we get to that sort of ethereal math part of it, it breaks apart. So my story ended early. 2.5 years into my college journey, I got kicked out for bad grades. How do you like them apples? That's sort of many of the jobs I've had. Yeah, my dad used to pay us to pick dandelions. And I don't know if many of you know about dandelions, but they grow back right away. So every day we'd go back and pick more dandelions. So my path wasn't a normal path. My path was about pivoting throughout it, right? It was leaving, getting kicked out of college. I was working at McDonald's and I got a job at Costco. Started in the food court, worked my way up to stocking the shelves at Costco. And that was when I applied at Electronic Arts for a QA testing role. which was so cool because some of the people I had worked with at McDonald's ended up going to work at EA. So they were my foot in the door. And luckily, Burnaby was the headquarters for Electronic Arts Canada. And that was about 35-minute drive from our house. So that's how my path got in. I got in through just basically brute force, not through brains, just through luckily being in the right place at the right time. And much like my own journey, as a company, Iron Galaxy, we've had to pivot a lot too, right? We sort of set out at the start to be a PC console house. And that's where it was at the start when we're working with Capcom and Namco on many products. And then over time, a mobile project comes along. You're like, well, we got to learn that, right? We want to expand and we want to try new things. So we started helping a bunch of different games. We did Batman Arkham Underworld for Android. We did Scribblenauts, which many of you I'm sure have played from iOS and Android, and got used to sort of making mobile games. And then when VR came along, same kind of thing. We're like, hey, we're pretty good at a lot of different technologies. So we did Skyrim and Fallout for VR. We worked on those with Bethesda. Worked with the crew at CCP on Spark. And so our journey was all about sort of pivoting along the way. And even when you figured all that stuff out, we even pivoted more. About a year ago, I was at a show and I met a young gentleman named Thomas Chenu. And Thomas was a Roblox superstar. He had bought 14 companies by the age of 17. And so we hired him to consult with us, to teach us how to make Roblox games. So we put 30 people on the team to build all kinds of experiences. They built a whole entire headquarters for Iron Galaxy in Roblox. We tried doing prototypes. We built a bunch of different game experiences. Really impressed with the diversity that the teams had built in the engine. And it was also just a fun way to try new things, right? Try to explore and trying to pivot and seeing if it's sustainable. Now, unfortunately, when all of your developers are based in the United States of America, RIP, by the way. Ooh, this last couple weeks has been pretty fucked up. Let's just be honest. But it's really difficult to create meaningful impact when it comes to profitability when you're looking at Roblox products, right? The budgets are very small, and so it's very hard to make a living. So the other thing we did is we pivoted because we have an Orlando office. We actually have access to Universal Studios and to Disney World. So we actually now are making rides for Universal Studios. The Minion Blast ride was an Iron Galaxy joint, right? So we're able to now do rides and build interactive experiences, which is super neat, and especially now we're close to Disney World too. Hopefully we get more work in the future. We have a team of people right now, 8 of them in Tokyo, building a new ride for Universal Studios Tokyo. Who would have ever thought from being a game dev that was just doing PC and console games that you could now get to get experience sort of traveling around the world and building interactive experiences. So a lot of people think ABC is for always be closing, but I have a different take on it, always be changing. I think it's important to try new things, to evolve, right? Put your foot in a lot of different things to make sure that you're resilient for the future. If you have to pivot in the future, it's important to be able to do that. One of my co-developers has this awesome saying, the worst thing that can happen to a brand new developer is their first game is success. Because then they might think that they had something to do with it. Right? Our industry is hit-driven, right? It is about culture, it's about art, it's about fashion. The minute that you think that you know more than the market's gonna kick you in the ass. So I think a lot of times to be successful isn't gonna be necessarily when your big lessons come, right? It's gonna be when you fail. And that's okay, right? I think it's important to have that balance and evolve as you go, right? Learn quickly and keep moving on. Number 4, be memorable. Now this one is a tough one, but it's important to understand that anything is hackable in the games industry. Life is a game, and I think our industry is a bit of a game too. One of my favorite examples of being memorable was one day I came into the office and I had a package on my desk, and it was this game called Rum Runners. Not a real game, a fictitious game. So I was like, what is this? I'm kind of curious about this game that someone submitted. And I start looking at the Lang Boys edition, Dave Lang, Adam Boys, and I was like, that's kind of interesting. And then we got, oh, it's a resume. What's going on here? And this guy, Vin Hill, had basically built a whole custom, the Lang Gang are at war with the Boys, 9.0 and Giant Bomb. The Lang Boys edition includes baseball cap, Canadian translation, dive kick ability. It was one of these examples of something so memorable that stood out that I had to give him a call. So the first thing I did as soon as I saw it is we called up Vin and talked to him about a job at Iron Galaxy because he stood out so much, right? So there's ways to do it like that, to sort of hack people's attention, to do something neat and unique. Sometimes, if you think you're really cheeky, you can do a stunt like I did here. So this is where I thought that it would be smart. There was a bunch of articles out about Capcom saying that Monster Hunter is not possible to come to the Nintendo Switch because of technological limitations of the Switch. So I was like, I'm going to tweet out that we could absolutely port it for them. Now, the important part about this tweet at the time, which was many years ago, is the time of the tweet. Someone might have been drinking some bourbon and playing some video games at 1:44 in the morning, thinking it was a good idea to tweet at a company in front of the world that we could port their game to the Nintendo Switch. So when I got in the office Monday morning, Dave, our founder, comes in. He's like, what on earth are you doing? That is not how we do business. And he's right. We did not get the job to port Monster Hunter to Nintendo Switch. But a crazy thing happened. That article, basically people started writing articles about my tweet that we wanted to do it. And a lot of publishers read that article. And a lot of publishers started calling us about other Nintendo Switch ports. Right? So even though a bourbon-based tweet at the wee hours of the morning didn't get us that business, it actually got us a lot of other business. Here's another great anecdote. So Dave, our founder, he's a gregarious guy, and we were in a brand new partnership with this new publisher, and we were out for dinner with them, and they had all their partners at this dinner. So there's like 20 of us sitting around. And the CEO of the publisher gets up, does a wonderful speech. Thank you all for coming. It's so great that we're all here together. It was around, we were at E3 at the time, back when E3 was a thing. And wonderful speech, and he sits down, and Dave, our founder, stands up. And he's like, I have a speech as well. And we've never met, like we don't know these people very well. He's like, I just want to say, I'm so proud of this team. We're working hard together. You guys are great partners. Everyone in this room, and he starts doing this 45-second speech that the CEO is just like, this is the greatest thing ever. And he's like, cheers to our publisher. And they were like, afterwards the CEO was like, I need your phone number. We're going to go golfing. And that memorable moment that Dave did, that little speech, ended up turning into a multi-year partnership with that publisher, only because Dave was memorable. That doesn't just go through for personalities or resumes. I think it's also important to evolve your visual stylings. So one of the things we've been working on for many years is Killer Instinct. It's probably one of the longest running projects at Iron Galaxy Studios. But what you don't know is our first pitch that we sent to them, to Microsoft, looked like this. This is two of the actual slides from the deck, the pitch deck for a video game, which is just massive sentences and garbage, right? When I saw this, when I got to IG, I was like, what on earth are you guys thinking? We're not going to get deals by having all these details. We take prototyping seriously. We aren't big fans of laying out plans. Of course we aren't. We're allowed to, I don't even know if ChatGPT wrote this. Well, I mean, it's too early, many years ago. But how we evolved our presentations was really important too, right? So if we sort of look in one of our recent pitches, this is sort of what our decks look like nowadays. Really slick, a lot simpler. And now that we learned a lot about PowerPoint too, the fact that you can import 3D models, it's a pretty neat little trick here, that you can actually have an Xbox that moves around the world, which is kind of neat. So just learning and being more memorable, even your pitches, learning from your partners, learning from feedback is super, super important. But it's also about demanding honesty. And what I mean by that is basically making sure that the people that you surround yourself with or the people that you're asking for feedback are going to give you real feedback. Right? It's very easy to be in an echo chamber where everyone's like, great job, that's awesome. And that makes me feel really weird. If I've shown something to many, many people, I'm like, yeah, it's great, I love it, no feedback. I'm like, no, pick it apart, like jam on it. So it's very, very important to have people that are gonna call you out and be honest with you. Next lesson, be vulnerable and authentic. This is obviously the cast from Inside Out 2. I have a 13-year-old son and a 15-year-old daughter. And my daughter makes me feel all of these feelings every day, all the time. Mostly lately this one, she stole her car recently. It's okay, we got it back. That was that day. But being vulnerable, being authentic, being honest with your feelings, and both at work, I think, and home is very, very important. One of the hardest things that we all had to go through was when COVID occurred, right? We got the phone call that it was all shutting down, everything was going to heck. Funny side story is that Dave Lang and I were in Napa Valley, and Chelsea was at home in Chicago. And so she had to basically kick everyone out of the studio and get everyone moved home within 48 hours. But we were going to stay in Napa for a couple extra days because we were like, oh, this will blow over in a couple weeks. We were wrong. But it sort of like made this new era, right, of us connecting with one another. The only way we could connect with one another was through screens. And that isn't very fun, right? We were stuck at home. And the first thing that we realized that if we're going to be able to cope with these issues together, we have to be honest about our own feelings. So we started hosting these sessions to talk about it as a company, these listening sessions where everyone would tune in, talk about their own challenges, talk about what problems they're facing. I talked about my depression. Chelsea was talking about her health issues. And it was really important for us to open up because we realized if we're not the ones opening up and we can't model that same vulnerability and honesty, then we're not going to get that reciprocally, right? And it was such a hard time that once people did start to open up and try to, be a little bit more social with one another, we created a lot more cohesion. People spun off and did play groups where they would play games at night to try to cope to it. But part of it was, first of all, modeling that stuff. The other part of modeling it is imposter syndrome. I'm up here right now giving you a talk about a bunch of things that I believe, but I don't really know what I'm doing. I'm about to leave Iron Galaxy, start a new company. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. And I think it's important for all of us to understand that everything we're doing every day of our lives, we're giving it our best shot, right? We don't know everything. We're all here because we want to learn. We want to get to know new people and new things. I think that's really, really important, right? To know that we're all in the same boat. None of us really know what we're doing, and that's okay. One of the most empowering phrases that I've come across in my career is this one. If you don't know something, you don't have to say, I don't know. You can say, let me get back to you. I'll look into it. I'll send you the numbers later. Especially in a pitch meeting. I saw some of the pitches in the pitch off yesterday. I'm like, let me get back to you. I don't have those numbers right now. And I think it's really important just to be able to have permission to admit your failures, right? What are you bad at? It's okay to talk about those things. Maybe not on a stage if you're not comfortable with it, but it's the way I think we can connect with one another and we can learn more quickly as we navigate really difficult times. Our next lesson is about growing with purpose. Iron Galaxy is now 300 people, which is a lot of people. And sometimes when you build a company, you think, hey, if I just put like all these awesome sayings on all the walls, then everyone will figure out our values. And one of my favorite stories was walking into an unnamed publisher that had all of these strong values written really in big letters all over the walls. And then I got out of the meeting, I'm like, there's no truth to any of those. There's no consistency there. And that's tough, right? You can't just write something on the wall and hope that, by the way, I just love how AI just can't figure out fingers and languages. Can we not just, I don't even know what some of these words are. But right, building a place in which everyone understands the growth mechanics, everyone understands that you're trying to nurture growth, that you're growing for purpose, right? I think is really, really important. There's a fascinating data point that I heard one time, which is all about growth, company growth, and the power of three. So this sort of is a thing that I heard many years ago, and I was like, it sounds like bullcrap, right? But the more I looked into it, and the more I looked at the growth of Iron Galaxy, it absolutely resonated. So basically, this is how many people you have at the company. When you're just 3 people, who's on first? We all kind of know what we're doing, right? Everyone's clear of the 3 of us. Everyone's doing a little bit of everything. At 10, picking up a shovel. Everyone's trying to do multiple different things as well, right? But you don't really have a big hierarchy. There isn't really a lot of layers. It's a pretty flat organization. When you get to 30, you got to build a team of leads, and those leads then have groups of people working for them. And that also imposes some challenges because some people might be first-time leads. And one of the things, by the way, we all have in common in this room, we've all worked for bad managers, right? I don't think anyone here is like, I've had 6 in a row that were amazing. A lot of times it's because we're not empowering our managers or teaching them the proper leadership skills, right? So sometimes these leads in the first-time roles are like, I have power now. I'm going to do things that make my people work for me. And you're like, that's not how it works. But when I was a young manager, I felt the same way, right? This is my team, I'm proud of this team, building sort of, trying to build alignment, but also build competition within a team. And that doesn't feel good either. At 100, which is right around the time I came to Iron Galaxy, leadership swells. Right now you have multi-levels. You got now we have the senior leadership team. We have the junior leadership team. You got your C-suite. I see you rolling your eyes. There's a lot of different groups that you're trying to build and manage, and that is really challenging. I think at 100, though, from a game dev perspective, feels like the number in which a lot of new studios are trying to aim at, get to 80 to 100, and that's about stop there or figure out how to go. Because I could say for firsthand that once you get to 300, now all the layers of management just start to exacerbate. We had an offsite just for our leadership team at Iron Galaxy. There was 20 of us, and we're only 300 people. Right? So you think about trying to manage all those groups and get that alignment. It's a lot of different work. And then the game of telephone starts to kick in, and if you're not using visuals for your presentations, then the information isn't getting through. And then we get to 1,000 and utter chaos erupts. Right? When you get to be a large company, it becomes a lot more difficult to manage, especially for game development. The only successful ones I've seen, though, are ones that sort of build this city-state approach, where they actually empower each of the subgroups to have agency over what they're building, right? It is possible to have a large company and to be part of a large company, but I think as long as you empower it, I think Microsoft does a really good job of some of this right now with many of the studios that are sort of leaving alone. Obsidian's sort of working independently within the city-state sort of program at Microsoft. Stuff like that I think can be successful. But the other thing I've realized is there's three key things that I find in my own career. This is actually one of the reasons why I've made some decisions in my career, is you can evaluate your progress in your career of these three aspects. One thing is, do I have autonomy? Okay, do I have the freedom to sort of build things on my own and be creative? Do I have a path to mastery? Do I have people around me or tools and technologies that are going to allow me to get better and increase my craft? And do I have a sense of purpose? So if you're lucky at your job, you have all three of these. Most of us have one or two. If you have zero of these that you feel right now, maybe it's time to think about the future. And that's what happened to me. I got to a point in one of my jobs that I was like, I did this sort of inventory. I didn't have a sense of purpose anymore. I didn't really know where the company was going. Didn't have a path to mastery. I wasn't learning a lot. And then I didn't ever have autonomy because a new boss came in and changed some rules. And so I think it's important to sort of look at because when you do have these things and people are very clear on them, then that leads to, I think, the best outcome, which is super happy people doing awesome work together, right? And if you can't just evaluate against that, or if you always want feedback, it's really important to ask your peers. It's an amazing tool, this one thing, which is just, if you message someone, say, I need your advice on something, or I need some help. Those two words, to me, I've found incredibly powerful, because when you ask another human being to their face, or on a LinkedIn message, or Twitter DM, however you communicate, right? I'm weird. Or WhatsApp. And you say, I'd really like your advice on this issue I'm facing. Give a little blurb. Do you have 10 minutes for a talk? And when you ask someone directly for advice or for help, using those words specifically, the chance of them responding to you is very high, because they do want to help. They do want to help you navigate through. A lot of times people are like, do you have time? I want to tell you about my studio. That's not the right way to put it. Just say, I'm facing a career, I need some career advice. I got 2 jobs I'm looking at, really love to pick your brain on it. And when you ask your peers, you'll get more of that honesty too, which I think is really important. All right, we're gonna go lesson number 7, practice unreasonable hospitality. This is a really, really cool book that was transformative for me by Will Guidara, who ran what became the #1 restaurant in the world. But he started sort of very low, and they built their way up. So what does restaurants have to do with video games? There's a story in the book that I'll sort of have a couple slides to tell about this family that is visiting New York City. So the restaurant they were running, 11 Madison Park, was in Times Square, or not in Times Square. It was right around the edge of Central Park. So the family's visiting from Europe, and they're dining at this very fine dining establishment. And this little girl looks out the window, and she's never seen snow in her life. It's starting to snow outside, and the snow's packing in. So as they're enjoying their dinner, the snow's packing in. She's just elated with excitement. Her little brother's there too, and he's excited too. So the waiter notices this. So he goes to the back, tells the manager, and at the end of the meal, a large black SUV had pulled up with 2 toboggans to take the kids to Central Park to go tobogganing. Only because at that restaurant, during the conversation, those kids were excited about snow. And for the next 2 hours, the manager of the restaurant had the kids tobogganing in Central Park. And it's just, to me, such a great example of a little movement. Those kids and that family will remember that moment for the rest of their life. They'll remember that time when they got to see snow and then go sledding in Central Park. Now, sometimes you can experience this too in your own world. I saw this tweet from Notch many years ago. The games he's claimed are his favorite of all time includes Doom 2, Dungeon Master 2, Half-Life 2. At the time, he was doing a lot of work with Microsoft. I was at PlayStation at the time, and I really wanted Minecraft to come to the PlayStation Vita, which is natural, and Notch wasn't responding to my messages and was not getting back to me. So one day I saw this tweet, and I went on eBay, and I bought a pristine, sealed copy of Dungeon Master 2, and I put that with a PlayStation Vita and 12 games in a nice package with a handwritten letter, and I sent it to him. And then a month later, Sony also once sent me an original copy of Dungeon Master 2. They had lying around for some reason. They sure had to bribe nerds. And Minecraft Vita came out and ended up selling millions and millions of units, right? Only because of that thing. It was a teeny little thing. I think the copy of the sealed Dungeon Master 2 was like $30. So buying that, putting that package together, sending it to Notch to get his attention, right? Totally worked. He knew he probably wanted to come to Vita eventually. We just want to make it a little bit easier. And sometimes bribing partners is just a fun thing to do. When I was at PlayStation, we had the ability to make all these custom PS3s for all of our partners. So I have about 8 of them I want to show you. We saw this designer online that was building these by hand, and I fell totally in love with all these custom ones. And this one's so cool because he burnt the flag and then also melted the PS3 underneath, which is kind of a neat approach. But like all this stuff, like he weathered the wood on Assassin's Creed Black Flag. And we just said, how many can I buy? 10 of them? And he's like, oh my God, PlayStation's phoning me to make cool stuff. And then of course the studios were like elated. The problem is they were so good that our CEO at the time was like, can we keep all these and like put them in our lobby? I'm like, well, these were supposed to be gifts for all of our partners. And so he said, can we just hire the guy to make a second version of everything? I'm like, we absolutely can. And so this guy that was making these things from hand just did a phenomenal job. The partners were elated. It was one of our E3s where we had them all laid out. And it was just really, really neat to be able to celebrate that with our partners. And also give back to the community. This guy was modding PS3s, which usually, if it was another platform, they might have just sued him. Instead, we were like, hey, why don't you work for us and do some of this stuff. So I think that unreasonable hospitality also comes down to a very basic premise. One of my good friends, Carter Lipscomb, he's a head of business development at Iron Galaxy. He's one of the sweetest, nicest, kindest human beings. And unfortunately, his father passed away some years ago. And I went to the service, and as part of the eulogy, his brother talked about his dad's favorite saying. And when he said it to me, I literally started crying because Carter's always been such a kind human being. And his dad said that all he ever told his kids was to be pleasant and be present. And it's really a powerful phrase, right? If you think about every interaction you're having with anyone, doesn't matter if they're a junior person, a senior person, in between, if they're in games, out of games, if they're serving you food, if they're the big boss, if you're always being pleasant and being present, it can really be a game changer. And it's impacted me a lot. Cultivate curiosity, number 8. So important. I always said when I had my kids, I wanted them to not have the best grades. I just wanted them to be the most curious. Oftentimes when we're overwhelmed in life, we could basically just be sitting there frustrated with what we're about to do. When I got the job at PlayStation, I didn't know a lot about anything. I knew how to make games, I knew QA, I knew a handful of stuff, but I sure as heck didn't know what the economics were of ordering hardware and software and printing discs and all that stuff. So what I did on my very first week is one of my favorite phrases, explain like I'm 5. So I walked into the department, Sony, the online store, Sony PlayStation Store, and I said, hello, Eric. He was the VP of the store. I was the VP of third-party partnerships. And I said, I don't know how any of this works. Please explain it to me like I'm 5. And he's like, how much time do you have? I'm like, as much time as you want. Now, the thing that I didn't realize is our department didn't have a very good relationship with their department, which I kind of found out later. So the next time I came to visit him, I said, here's a 5-pound bag of M&Ms. Here's some roses. Can you explain to me again what you guys do and how we can help? But what we started to do then as a team is I went through to every single department within PlayStation, asking them what their core goals are. What are they trying to achieve? And then what I did is I took their main goal, their main KPI, which are key performance initiative, and I said, I'm going to make that a part of ours too. And by doing that, we were not only cultivating curiosity, but we were also pulling in an awesome sort of task list of what things we should focus on. And that's really, really important. The other part that's important is ensuring all of your team members, you understand sort of what's keeping them up at night. We have this super cool tool at Iron Galaxy. It's not proprietary. Anyone can use it. It's called 15-5. And it's a really neat tool that everyone checks in on every week. They basically say, how was their week, 1 out of 5? How did it go? What are the problems and all that stuff? And it's so cool because we get to cultivate this curiosity by asking people on a regular basis how they're feeling, what's holding them up, what's jamming them up. If you ever want to know more about it for your company, let me know. Our HR team would love to walk you through it because it's been transformative for us as a company, right? But when you're a team and you have a bunch of different curiosities and a bunch of different people that are forging and discovering the future, I think it's important to get alignment, right, during that curious phase. Part of it is just trying to get progress forward. Disagree and commit is one of my favorite sayings too. Even if you can't come to a unanimous agreement, how do we just move forward? We could stay and talk about something for the next 6 years. Let's make progress. And if we fail, that's okay, because we're going to learn and get better, right? If you're calling every shot and you're really good at everything, that's not going to make you grow very much either. And one of the tools that helped me along my career is this shirt analogy. A boss rolled out a brand new thing that we all had to do. He's like, we all have to do this whole new process. And all of us were like, new process. I don't want to. And he's like, pretend like it's a brand new shirt that your grandma got you. Maybe it's a sweater your grandma bought you. And just wear it every day for the next 30 days. Wake up in the morning, put on the sweater, and just act like you're going to enjoy it. And it really was transformative because as soon as you go on that journey and try something on, like it's your own, then it absolutely can sort of stick better. Versus being like, this is stupid new person doing crappy things, right? Putting the shirt on is really important. The other part that's important is, I think, while we're on our curiosity path, is defining what you're trying to achieve, not only in your own career and within your own company, but also what you are not trying to achieve. One of the favorite things we do right now is we'll also often put up a caveat slide at the start of a presentation. Here's what you're not going to see. You're not going to see gameplay. You're not going to see fancy this. You're not going to see voice acting. You're not going to see mocap. And then the publisher's like, no, that doesn't look very cool at all. But then so all their expectations drop. And the thing that they're not doing now during their presentations is not thinking about what they're not seeing. They're only taking in what they see as you go, because you've already basically throttled their presentation to make it a boring journey. So defining what you aren't, I think, and we did the same thing with Rumbleverse, what we are and what we aren't. We didn't want to be a fighting game, right? We did want to be all about action and action sports and action combat. So balancing out what you are and what you aren't, I think, is important too. And the final, I promised you only 8 lessons, but I gave you an extra one because inflation's high these days. So embracing the journey. As you go on your journey through your career, it's super important to just take each of the lessons as you go and take it in, because it can be hard a lot of times. It can be fun a lot of times too. I mentioned COVID before, which obviously was a massive bummer. Nobody liked it. Boo-hoo. It sucked. But one of the things we did at Iron Galaxy is, that's my son Parker many years ago, we put together care packages for all of employees. And because it was still unsafe, we drove it and delivered it to every one of our employees. So across Orlando and Chicago, we made drops for 200 plus people. And we gave them pasta and basically make a dinner on Iron Galaxy. And that was a way for us to try to, even though we're going through tough times as a company, how can we show and pass it forward? And cooking actually became a big theme during COVID that brought a lot of us together. I love to cook. I was once on a Canadian cooking show, which is true, many years ago. Really sad, dark part is the host died 6 months later. So they canceled the show. But anyway, what we did during COVID, though, is we started streaming cooking shows to each other. We're going to make dinner tonight in our house. And we turn the camera on, and we basically make dinner and show everyone what we were doing and how we're building it. And that became a theme of cohesiveness within the COVID, right? Because we were able to share how we're building things, how we're making things, and a little bit of our family recipes. So it inspired us that holiday season to basically make our own cookbook. So we compiled everyone's recipes across all the studios, their family recipes, they rated them, and we put them all together in one big book and gave that out as our holiday gift. But we didn't think that would be enough, so because our name is Iron Galaxy, we found this amazing blacksmith. She was up in Wisconsin, and she made us custom cast iron pans. And to me, it's such a great analogy. A cast iron pan is such a great analogy for our careers and our lives, because cast iron gets better the more you use it, right? The more seasoning you go on it. You can burn things in it, that's fine, cleans up. But the seasoning of the cast iron pan, I think, was so impactful. which also just inspired me to try to share when we could come back out of COVID and we could still do the cooking stuff. We took it on the road, and this is me cooking pancakes. This is me in Stockholm with 10 chambers. This is at our Chicago studio that's down in Nashville. But trying to always be, supplying fun and good times for the team, and also being present. I think being around people and stuff like that is really important. Last thing I want to put is one of my favorite sayings from Tom Hanks: "This too shall pass." It's a very powerful phrase that I use a lot in my life. When you're going through a hard time, this too shall pass. Now, good times also will pass. But the important thing is each part of what we're doing in our careers is another learning experience. And so when we know that this too shall pass, we can move on to the next challenge, learn from it, and evolve. And thank you all for your time today.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that. It was absolutely brilliant. I'm
time for questions, yeah.
I'm sure we're going to have questions. So if you do have one, stick your hand up. There we go.
If it's about a pancake recipe, it's a family secret.
Oh, sit down then.
Kidding.
Well, thank you for such a detailed retrospective of your time at Iron Galaxy. One of the points you mentioned being about knowing when to pivot.
Yeah.
This sort of acting as kind of a cornerstone in you changing to another company. I was interested in understanding what was it that made you decide to pivot to start a new company?
It's a great question. I have wanderlust. So every company I've worked at ever has been 4 years max. That was at EA, Capcom, Midway, PlayStation were all exactly 4 years. I have something in my brain that just goes off. At Iron Galaxy, it didn't go off at 4 years because COVID hit. And I didn't realize at the time, I never did the pattern matching of understanding what's happening. And so because we just know that we needed to be there for our people, that part of me shut down. And then it sort of reemerged years later. And I started to think about like, what makes me the happiest I've been in my career? And I think about the most impact I can have too. So you'll hear more about the new company in January, but it's really about sort of trying to make the industry better as a whole. And I figured that would be a better way to spend my next 10 or 15 years focusing on that. I mean, the team's amazing. The company's awesome. Chelsea and Dave kill it. They're the best. We've just got an incredible team. But at some point, sort of my brain goes off and I'm like, I have to go into new adventures. But also came back to, am I being challenged every day? What makes my spirit animal sort of sing? So yeah, it was basically listening to my inner monologue. Yeah, sure. What's that? Yeah, new company is my company, my own. Yeah, yeah. Oh, we got.
Hey,
oh, yeah.
Thank
Hi.
you. Wicked talk. What was the biggest error of judgment you ever made, and was it avoidable?
Yeah, it was avoidable. That's a great question. Probably a judgment call. We were working with on a big project, and what oftentimes is when you're negotiating a project, you just start working in good faith. And so we started deploying a bunch of resources on this project, and I was like, we got this in the bag. Like this is totally no problem at all. And then about 3 months in the negotiation, while our team was working on it, the publisher canceled the contract. And so I lost because I'd made my own bet. Right? I said to David Chelsea, I trust these people. I think this is going to go well. And it didn't. And so the key is, though, to come back and say, I take full responsibility. Right? It's on me. We'll figure out how to make up the lost revenue. That, I think, is a pretty good example one. Sometimes it's just judgment calls, making a bet, and then being like, oh, you sort of walk through that aspect of it. But avoidable, yeah. I mean, if you play more risk-averse, I think you can avoid more of those mistakes, but I like to trust first, then verify. Some people like to verify first, then trust. It all depends on how you're sort of, the good news is because we have me, Dave, and Chelsea as the partners of the company, there's that balance, right? We always say that everything has to be unanimous, and if it isn't, one of us has to have religion about it, right? And I had religion about that, and I was wrong. And so I think admitting it back to them and saying, I fucked up, and it cost us a bunch of money, right? What are they going to fire me? I'm kidding.
Hey, thank you.
Sure.
Excellent talk and very impressive public speaking skills. I've been trying to learn about that, and that was perfect, very fluid. Well done. So you were saying that it's really important to be memorable and be yourself, and I find that as a young player looking at games magazines and stuff like that, I never really got a feeling for what the people working in those games was like.
Yeah.
And there's very, very few proper mainstream media that does this well, and I think that you were a part of it for me, because Giant Bomb at Night at E3 was incredible. It was my favorite time of the year, and I miss it very much. And your couch chats with John Vignacchi, Dave Lang, Jeff Gerstmann were amazing and really funny. If you haven't watched these, you should. But
a lot of drinking. There's a lot of drinking.
Yes. They haven't happened in a while. I think the last one was in 2019. So my question is, how can I get my fix? Is there anywhere else where these things are happening?
I think it's actually one of the biggest problems, not one of the biggest commercial problems in our industry, but one of the biggest issues in our industry is just lack of visibility. Danny O'Dwyer does incredible series with his videos about deep dives behind the scenes on developers. But one of the things that we push for when I was at PlayStation is having the developer on the stage. I want to hear from them directly. I want to hear them tell their story. And I kind of feel like this migration towards just watching a trailer soup thing is like, not for me. It's more for the TikTok generation, but I like the stories and stuff like that. But I agree with you. I think it's massively missing from our industry, and I think there is. You're right. It's a lot of it's behind us, and I hate that. I wish there was more visibility. It also the risk reward nowadays with fandomism and online internet trolling and stuff like that. It puts a lot of sort of onus on the people and pressure on them to be more things than they want to be, and I think that's also a challenge too. But yeah, I completely agree with you. It's totally missing. I wish it was back.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I've got a couple of questions. First of all, what are mistakes you are regretting most? And the second question, what's your advice for a very young studio, first couple of years on first game, total new?
All right. I don't have a lot of regrets in my life. I just think trying to focus on your regrets or your mistakes, I think it could consume you. And so I just try to I'm like a goldfish. I just want to new day, new dawn. What's up today? What's excited? Somebody asked me why are you at this show? I'm like, to learn more. I mean, to be curious, to continue to evolve. So I don't think about my mistakes a lot. I've got a shit ton. I could fill the Atlantic Ocean with my mistakes. But so none of them stick out. Best advice for a new studio, I think part of it is just getting your values proper, right? What are your values and goals? We didn't have our values written down at Iron Galaxy until year 8. So we're 17 now. So it wasn't until 8 years in. So as early as possible, because a lot of times when you're building your values with your founding team, you get to understand how they're thinking about it. Also, what are your larger terms goals? What are your 3-year goal, 5-year goal, 10-year goal? Do you want to sell it? Do you want to make 6 games? Do you want to co-dev? Because the minute that I think companies go bad is when that alignment breaks, right? So if you're doing regular check-ins and then evaluating your values as you go, I think it's critically important. Yeah. But good luck in your journey. Yeah.
Hi, thank you so much for the talk. Amazing. So I have a question regarding visibility of Iron the Galaxy itself. I used to be a gigantic sponge of knowledge for everything gaming until some point where it actually got too much to actually absorb. And one of the things that it always surprises me is how Iron Galaxy is involved with so many titles, and
I didn't even actually mention a bunch of the games that we're working on.
And I didn't know about it. The only thing that I knew regarding Killer Instinct was that from some other outlets, it was viewed as kind of a negative thing because Iron Galaxy was taking over a project for someone else. But I mean, they were done with it basically. But all of the other things, like you mentioned, Switch ports. You didn't mention which ones, and I still don't know which ones.
Yeah.
Because it's
because this isn't an advertisement.
Right. No. I mean, are you I've never seen front and center saying Iron Galaxy part of this.
Sure. It's a great question. To rattle off some of the ones we've done the last handful of years: Fortnite, Apex Legends, college football, Teamfight Tactics. Valorant, Call of Duty, Uncharted, Last of Us 2, Skyrim, Starfield, missing a ton. But that's the last few years of what we worked on as a studio. I love the question because that was my question when I joined. I said, why aren't we bragging about everything that we work on? And then we started to do that. And we realized that's not our job. Our job is to enhance the games that our partners are making. And the minute that you try to take credit for someone else's work, even though you're part of the team, you often get your hand cut off, right? Not purposely. So we took a we went and started getting very active, especially when we were working on Fortnite. We're like, we're working on Fortnite. Can you believe this? And Epic's like, and then we weren't working on Fortnite and many other things. But we realized that our role is to help our partners. And it's a different perspective. We are a service company first and a software company second. And it's tough to think about as a developer because you want to brag about it. You want to show everyone all the stuff you're doing. You want to put it on ArtStation and brag about it from the top of the hill, especially when it's the kind of games that we work on. But it's almost embarrassing when I rattle them off because everyone like starts to roll their eyes after I name the third game, right? They're like, oh, here's that. I'm bragging about all their games. But it's one of those things that when you're building the vision for your studio, we realized very early on, we're a business-to-business company, right? So the most important audience for us is publishers and other studios. So the fan base, we thought like people that like Divekick are gonna like Extinction and are gonna like Rumbleverse, or are gonna like the port that we did for Game X or Game Y. It's like, no, none of them talk to each other. None of them know each other. None of them even know that we do any of that stuff. So when you go to the website, you get to see all of it, but you realize that like it's actually, it's not something we brag about. But it's a great question. It's about your identity with your studio, making sure you're clear in it so you don't have to overcompensate. That might get you in trouble with your partners. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
Cool.